9 elite alien soldiers dropped in to kill one human. They had thermal gear, stealth drones, and neural targeting. He had a bolt-action rifle, a cracked visor, and a pet coyote. But they were the ones who froze. The sky screamed as the dropships sliced through the clouds, fire trails hissing in the upper atmosphere. Inside, 9 soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in a silence that wasn't confidence, it was boredom. These weren't just any alien warriors. They were from the Warlords of Exoprime, a syndicate that carved empires through solar systems like meat through bone. Each one of them had war scars older than Earth's moon colonies. And their orders were embarrassingly simple. Drop into a frozen wasteland on a minor outer planet, locate and eliminate one human sniper who had interfered with Warlord operations on Targon 7. The mission brief had been insultingly short. 1 human. Isolated. Cold planet. Kill shot only. Return in 12 hours. They didn't even bother memorizing his name. The soldier in the lead, armor glinting with frost runes, cracked his neck and checked his loadout for the 3rd time. Behind him, the others laughed quietly over comms. One played a card game on his wrist display. Another was watching an Earth documentary on Arctic penguins and mocking the narrator. One of them joked that maybe this sniper was a ghost, or a yeti, or some frost demon who drank rocket fuel and fired icicles. They all laughed. None of them were laughing when the rear hatch opened to an abyss of white. The temperature was a living thing, clawing, howling, biting. The ground beneath their boots hissed as snow met armor. Visibility was barely 20 feet. But they activated their helmets, linked up through HUD and thermal grid, and fanned out in a perfect V formation across the tundra. And not one of them noticed that someone had already seen them coming. 5 kilometers away, under a blanket of rock, snow, and camo mesh faded so perfectly into its surroundings it may as well have been grown from the ice itself, a human eye opened behind a frozen rifle scope. Kepler Ward hadn't blinked in 27 minutes. He'd heard the ship coming 10 minutes before they landed. He'd seen its silhouette in the clouds, watched the vapor trail break like a bleeding vein across the sky. The coyote beside him, he called her hush, had twitched her ears but didn't make a sound. Neither did he. He didn't need sound. He needed wind speed. Barometric pressure. Distance to target. His breath fogged the inside of his cracked visor. He'd been living off the grid for 46 days, outlasting patrols, dodging drones, and slowly becoming part of the landscape. The Warlords wanted him gone, and they kept sending stronger teams, louder tech. But none of them understood the basic rule of sniping. You don't fight the snow. You become it. Through his scope, he counted the shapes moving across the horizon. 9. Not 10, not 6, 9. Arrogant. They always sent odd numbers when they were overconfident. Like a war painter signing his name. Kepler watched them split into squads. Some moved toward a craggy ridge. Others slid into a ravine. One, a brute with double plasma axes, trailed behind, probably acting as rear cover. That one was first. The shot was slow, clean, inevitable. No crack of sound. Just a soft puff, like air escaping from a sleeping giant. The alien dropped into the snow without a twitch, face first, his heat signature vanishing instantly. The others didn't even notice until the command HUD blinked red. That was the moment when something subtle shifted in the surviving 8. It wasn't panic. Not yet. It was the unfamiliar sensation of being watched. Kepler adjusted his aim again, his fingers wrapped in thick thermal mesh. He didn't rush. He never did. Sniping wasn't about pulling the trigger. It was about building pressure until the bullet was mercy. One of the aliens knelt to scan for traps. Kepler smirked. "Good dog," he whispered. Then fired. Another went down. Head jerked sideways. The snow swallowed the sound before it could echo. The alien commander barked something in his native tongue and ordered everyone to spread out and activate motion sweepers. They fired off drones, scanning the terrain in 360 spirals. Kepler adjusted again. The drones wouldn't help them. He'd learned how to mimic static return signals using scraps of foil and the reflective coating from one of their earlier tech drops. He watched their confusion build. One of the soldiers started to panic, spinning in place. He shot that one next, center mass. 3 down. The remaining 6 began to fan wider. Kepler let them hope. He wasn't here to survive. He was here to teach a lesson. The last group sent to kill him had tried to use fire charges. They'd melted half a glacier and almost drowned themselves. That story made it back to Vexa Prime, but the Warlords thought it was cowardice, not skill. So now they'd sent these 9. Kepler chuckled under his breath. They'd send fewer next time. One of the aliens attempted to take higher ground, bounding up a cliff with augmented legs. His heat trail made him an easy target. Kepler adjusted the wind compensation and let the rifle settle. Then he blinked once, slowly, and squeezed. The bullet caught the alien mid-jump. He didn't fall. He cartwheeled, end over end, slamming into the cliff base hard enough to shake snow loose for 100 meters. 4. Now they were shouting. Not just orders, fear. Kepler could hear the pitch change through the stolen comms unit spliced into his helmet. He recognized the tones. It was the same note he'd heard from humans the first time aliens landed on Earth and proved bullets could bounce off skin. It was the sound people made when they realized the predator wasn't a beast. It was a man. A man they couldn't see. Kepler moved like a ghost, crawling out from his perch, never standing, never shifting heat signature too fast. The snow disguised his scent. His suit masked his profile. His steps were deliberate, timed with gusts of wind. Every movement was older than war itself, older than noise. He took 15 minutes to relocate 200 feet, then settled into a new position behind an ice ridge. Hush moved beside him, brushing against his side. Her breath fogged in the cold, but she didn't whine. He handed her a bite of ration bar and whispered, "That's 5. It wasn't. Not yet. But it would be." He adjusted his rifle again. The aliens tried triangulation now, 3 to a point. One shouted into the wind, daring the ghost to show himself. Kepler waited until the shout echoed. Then he fired at the echo. The soldier dropped. Head clean gone. Now it was 5. They stopped shouting after that. And they stopped advancing. Because by now, the smartest of them finally understood, they hadn't landed to hunt something fragile and hiding. They'd landed inside his scope. And the sniper didn't miss. The snow didn't stop. It never did here. It fell in soft spirals, so silent it made the entire planet feel like it was holding its breath. And for the 6 soldiers left, that silence had become unbearable. Their boots crunched over frost-cracked terrain as they moved slower, less confident, constantly looking over their shoulders. They no longer swept the terrain like elite commandos. They walked like prey in a forest they didn't understand. The wind whispered things that weren't there. Shapes moved at the edge of their vision. Every rock might be a rifle. Every patch of snow might be hiding death. Their cohesion started to crack like the thin ice beneath them. Kepler watched all of this from a distance, sipping what was left of his melted snow water. His hands didn't shake. His breath remained steady. Hush slept beside him, tail curled around her face, ears twitching only when the wind changed. He'd rotated position again, this time to the high side of a ridge where he'd once trapped an alien scout team under collapsing snow slabs. That had been weeks ago. Their bones were still there under the drift, weapons frozen mid-reach. The trick was simple: dig out an underpass, place a heat lure, and wait. The moment they gather, collapse it. Aliens, despite their genetic enhancements and armor, were always arrogant. They assumed their gear would compensate for their stupidity. It rarely did. The 6 now alive had started grouping into pairs. Kepler saw one of them drop a seismic sensor into the snow, hoping it would give them warning. It wouldn't. Not here. The planet's sub-ice rivers echoed across miles. Every vibration would feel like an incoming stampede. Kepler knew that because he'd tested those same sensors. He also knew they only worked when the target was stupid enough to sprint. Kepler didn't sprint. He didn't even walk anymore unless it was under fog or during whiteout. The snow was his shield. The cold was his partner. They weren't weapons. They were his home. One of the aliens started mumbling to himself through his comms, flicking rapidly through HUD filters. He switched from heat to motion to magnetics, then back to heat. None of it worked. Kepler's suit emitted only one signature, his breath, and even that was funneled downward through a snow filter. He had designed it during a 6-day blizzard, scavenging insulation from downed drones and dead scouts. Not many people could say their sniper blind was stitched together from the scraps of their enemies. Kepler could. As the aliens huddled near a broken ridge, trying to warm up, Kepler prepared his next move. He didn't just want them dead. He wanted them humiliated. Broken. Sent home in fragments, if they got sent home at all. He unpacked the small transmitter he modified last week and flipped it on. Static buzzed through the alien comms. Then his voice came through, calm and collected, dripping with dry sarcasm. "Evening, gentlemen. Nice of you to drop in. The forecast calls for heavy snowfall, and regret." The aliens froze. One turned in circles. Another dropped to a knee and began scanning frantically, trying to locate the signal. They wouldn't. The signal bounced off an old mining relay 2 kilometers south. Kepler grinned. This was the part he liked best, the unraveling. The fear creeping in where pride used to sit. The alien squad leader, a thick brute with mandible armor and a permanent scowl, barked something in his native dialect. It roughly translated to, "Shut that voice off." Kepler didn't. "I was gonna let one of you go. Just to tell the story, you know? But then number 4 pissed himself. Changed my mind." They fired blindly into the ridge. Plasma bolts scorched stone, melted patches of snow, and lit the air with heat flares. Kepler let them waste ammo. He let them scream. Then he waited for silence to return like a curtain falling after a bad play. And then he struck. The one closest to the edge went down first. Not a bullet. A wire. A tension trap Kepler had left 3 days ago in case the aliens circled wide. It caught the soldier's leg mid-step and yanked him backwards into a crevasse hidden by thin ice. His scream was short, cut off by the distant crunch of impact. The others turned, shouted, advanced. Kepler didn't fire again. He didn't need to. The hole he'd fallen into had walls too steep to climb, and the temperature down there would finish him within minutes. That was 6 gone. The remaining 5 formed a tighter wedge, still covering angles, but their movements had changed. No more arrogance. Now it was desperation masquerading as discipline. Kepler spoke into the comms again, softer this time, like a bedtime story. 5 left. That's a basketball team, isn't it? You guys play? No? Shame. I'm more of a chess guy. They didn't respond. They knew talking would only make them targets. But one of them, a slimmer scout unit built for speed and recon, tried a dash maneuver to draw fire. Kepler let him. Let him sprint a full 50 meters in a zigzag. When the scout stopped, thinking he'd tricked the sniper, Kepler fired, not at the man, but at the snow near his feet. The powder exploded upward, blinding him. In that moment of confusion, another soldier stepped forward to help him and exposed the side of his helmet. Kepler's second shot was surgical. One eye socket exploded. The alien collapsed without a word. 4. The scout scrambled back, covered in blood that wasn't his. The squad leader barked again. This time, the tone was pure panic. They were no longer trying to kill. They were trying to escape. Kepler tapped his helmet twice and switched comm channels. "If you're heading home, leave your weapons in the snow and walk north until you see the broken antenna tower. That's the edge of my mercy. Past that, you better start praying to something." The squad leader answered this time. His voice was coarse, cracked by frostbite and fury. "You are dead. You just don't know it yet." Kepler smiled, half amused, half pitying. "I know exactly what I am. That's why you're afraid." He cut the channel and lay flat again, waiting for the sun to start fading. When it did, the shadows stretched long across the snow. Kepler didn't move. He just watched. Watched as the remaining 4 huddled together, turning every 5 seconds. They were out of plans. Out of courage. Out of time. He adjusted his rifle, whispered to Hush, and said the same words he always did when the wind slowed down. "Let's go hunting." The cold had stopped being a sensation for them. It was a presence now, an invisible, merciless predator gnawing at every exposed edge of their armor. The remaining 4 soldiers trudged forward in silence, boots dragging, weapons raised but hands shaking, vision flickering from low-power reserves in their HUDs. The snow no longer looked like terrain. It looked like a grave waiting to be filled. Every step they took felt like it might be their last. They whispered to each other over the comms, their voices stripped of command and bravado, now low, frantic, and brittle. They had landed thinking they would exterminate a pest. What they had walked into was something far worse. Something invisible. A man who had become legend by doing the one thing they never expected from a human, surviving in the places they wouldn't dare sleep. Kepler moved like the falling snow, quiet, constant, and patient. He had circled behind them now, flanking their position from a rocky ice shelf he'd mapped weeks earlier. Hush followed close, barely leaving a trail. Kepler knew the ground, the wind, the cover. These soldiers might have better sensors, better tech, and armor woven with battlefield polymers, but they lacked the one advantage that truly mattered in war: the land wasn't theirs. And worse, they didn't understand who they were fighting. Not a sniper. Not just a soldier. Kepler had died once on this frozen wasteland. Everything after had been vengeance in slow motion. He stopped at the edge of a shallow basin where the snow packed unevenly. He'd dug it days ago. Filled it with ice chips and plasma coil fragments from a fallen probe. It looked natural, but anyone who stepped in it would trip a loop sensor. A sensor hardwired to explode with the plasma cell he'd buried just beneath the surface. He waited as the soldiers crept forward. They scanned constantly, their vision riddled with motion alerts and phantom blips. But none of them scanned down. That was always the problem with enhanced combat vision. They trusted it too much. The first one fell into the trapped chest first. The snow gave with a soft puff, and before he could scream, the coil detonated with a dull hump, sending a ripple of heat and red mist into the air. His body bounced once, then slumped forward, smoke curling from the seams of his armor. The others dove behind ice chunks, shouting over each other in blind confusion. Kepler didn't fire. He didn't need to. He just stayed crouched, watching their panic stretch out across the snow like spilled ink. 3 left. They regrouped, but not as a unit. The squad leader was yelling commands that no one followed. The scout had curled into himself, hugging his rifle like a child clings to a stuffed toy during a nightmare. The last heavy, a brute with twin shoulder cannons and half a cybernetic jaw, scanned wildly, looking for a target that had never revealed itself. Kepler's voice came over their comms again, softer this time, almost gentle. "I hope you all wrote goodbye letters. I'm collecting them." They fired in every direction, wasting heat rounds and pulse bursts. The snow lit up with flashes, melting then hardening again into slick ice under their boots. Kepler crawled to the next ridge, slower now. No rush. Let them burn out. Let them scream into the storm until the only thing left to hear was the wind. Hush stood alert beside him, ears twitching. She didn't bark. Never had. But she turned her head suddenly toward the west, where the horizon looked darker than it should. Kepler followed her gaze and saw the first signs of the blizzard. It wasn't a problem. For him, it was a gift. The storm rolled in low, blanketing everything in shifting white. Visibility dropped to a few feet. The aliens tried activating thermal overlays, but their suits were glitching now from the cold, from stress, from systems overworked trying to regulate organ and machine alike. Kepler slipped through the fog like a shadow no one ever trained to see. When the scout tripped over a patch of uneven ice, Kepler was already there. One hand clamped his mouth, the other drove a blade into the gap between helmet and collar. The scout died without a sound, eyes wide, staring at a snowflake frozen to Kepler's mask. 2. The squad leader screamed his name in rage and grief. Not Kepler's. The scouts. That was the moment Kepler knew they'd lost the will to fight. When names mattered more than protocol, it was over. He didn't answer. Just let that scream hang in the air. Just let the wind carry it into oblivion. The heavy opened fire again, pulse cannons lighting up the storm in blind arcs. One round hit a ridge too close to his commander, shattering it and sending a curtain of snow down on them both. Kepler moved again, silent and careful. The leader was pinned under the snow, trying to dig out, his rifle jammed under one arm. Kepler moved past him. He didn't need him yet. He wanted the heavy next. That one was still dangerous. That one might actually kill someone if he panicked the right way. The heavy turned at the last moment, eyes catching a flicker of movement. He fired. The shot seared past Kepler's shoulder, vaporizing a rock behind him. He rolled, fast and low, then rose into a crouch. He didn't use the rifle this time. He lobbed a small EMP pellet from his belt, an old human tech trick, dumb and dirty. It detonated midair. The brute staggered. His HUD blinked. His cannon stopped spinning. And in that split second Kepler was on him. They collided like two animals. The heavy swung wildly. Kepler dodged, slid low, grabbed the back of the alien's leg and stabbed upward through a vulnerable joint. The brute screamed. Kepler ducked behind him and fired point-blank into the base of his skull. The round hit hard enough to crack the helmet and leave a crater in the snow behind them. 1. The squad leader had crawled halfway out of the drift, watching all of it with wide, disbelieving eyes. He looked at Kepler like he was seeing a god or a ghost or both. Kepler stepped into view, rifle raised but not aimed. He wanted the man to see it. To see who had killed his entire team. "You were sent here to kill me," Kepler said, voice low and calm. "But you never even saw me." The alien raised his weapon, tried to steady it. His hand shook. He pulled the trigger. Nothing. Frozen. Jammed. Useless. Kepler nodded once. Then fired. The last soldier dropped, snow catching him like a cradle. 9. The storm howled louder now, blanketing the carnage in frost. Kepler lowered his rifle, scanned the field one last time, and whispered to hush. No one left. The coyote walked beside him, stepping over bodies and broken gear. Kepler moved to the highest ridge, pulled out a flare, and lit it. The orange fire cut through the storm. Not for rescue. For warning. He stabbed it into the ice, right beside the leader's body. Then carved a message in the snow with the butt of his rifle. Send more. I'm still bored. There was no silence in the storm, only a constant roar, as if the wind itself was howling in disbelief. The ridge was marked now, orange flare flickering defiantly as snow tried to smother it. Around it, bodies lay in scattered shapes, no longer soldiers, no longer elite. Just frozen wreckage, carbon and ego shredded by one man and a bolt-action rifle. Kepler stood at the edge of the cliff, hood drawn up, face half-lit by the flare's glow. He didn't feel the satisfaction most people imagined would come after something like this. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was just gravity pulling the inevitable toward the ground. They sent 9 to kill him. They were all dead. That was math, not glory. He scanned the horizon again. No movement. No heat trails. No humming drones or footsteps hidden beneath the shriek of the wind. Hush sat beside him, alert but relaxed, tail twitching in the snow. She sensed it too. Nothing left out there. No more threats. But Kepler's eyes weren't focused on the battlefield. They were watching the sky. Something had changed. The clouds weren't just thick, they were glowing faint red, like a pulse hiding inside bruised flesh. A second flare of color shimmered from orbit. A ship. Bigger than the drop carrier. Much bigger. He squinted. The shape was wrong for a pickup. No recovery shuttle ran hot enough to bleed through cloud cover like that. This wasn't retrieval. This was observation. Confirmation. The Warlords wanted proof. They didn't believe the tracker feeds. They didn't believe 9 of their best could vanish without landing a scratch on one man. So they sent eyes. A high-atmosphere recon ship, cloaked but radiating in low orbit, trying to watch the ghost that killed their pride. Kepler didn't wave. He didn't raise a middle finger or shout defiance. He just stared at the shadow in the sky and let them look. Let them see what defeat really looked like. Inside that ship, far above the storm, an officer stared at screens that flickered with heat signatures and overlapping error codes. 9 signals lost. All biometric data offline. 1 flare lit. 1 human pacing beside it, rifle slung, pet animal trailing. No wounds. No visible damage. Minimal heat signature. And still breathing. The officer frowned. He'd seen combat gods in the arena. He'd seen elite shock troops raise planets in under an hour. But he had never, in all his campaigns, seen one man erase a strike team in under a day without even breaking formation. He didn't send a report. He just forwarded the feed straight to the Warlords Core Council. And they responded the only way tyrants do when reality threatens their reputation. They ordered it scrubbed. Wipe the footage. Classify the report. Blame it on equipment failure. Call it a training op gone wrong. Say the soldiers got trapped in a natural disaster. Say the human fled. Say anything but the truth. Because truth was dangerous. Truth bred stories. And stories, when whispered often enough in low, dark corners of the galaxy, became resistance. One man in snow with a bolt-action rifle wasn't supposed to be a threat. He wasn't supposed to be a headline. But now his name would ripple through mercenary bars and smugglers' halls, spreading like smoke. Kepler Ward. The ghost. The man who didn't miss. Kepler didn't know any of this yet. Not in full. But he'd seen the way tyrants operated. He knew how quickly power turned to denial when faced with humiliation. So he left them a final message. Not a broadcast. Not a transmission. Something they couldn't delete. A formation in the snow, bodies arranged in a circle with their helmets removed, set around the flare like ancient warning stones. In the center, he placed a shard of reflective plating from one of the fallen drones, etched with a single line using the tip of his knife. You sent 9. I sent them home. He stepped away from it without ceremony. No dramatics. No speech. Just a breath and a slow turn toward the east, where the blizzard was starting to thin. He walked, rifle resting across his shoulders, posture relaxed like a man leaving a campfire, not a battlefield. Hush trotted ahead, ears perked, steps light. They both knew the way now. The storm had carved a map into the ground. A memory trail of the fight that would become a myth. By the time night settled, Kepler had reached the frozen ravine he used as a pass-through. He slipped down it easily, sliding on practiced heels, snow muffling every footfall. He didn't camp. He didn't stop. Not yet. He had a secondary blind 2 clicks south, an old antenna tower buried in ice, hollowed out and converted into a shelter. Most didn't know it existed. Those who did never made it out. It was his fallback point, his place to think, to clean gear, and most importantly, to listen. Inside, it was dry and silent, the walls insulated with thermal padding scavenged over months. He unpacked slowly, feeding Hush with the last of his jerky and checking the bolt action on his rifle for wear. Still clean. Still smooth. The gun was old, ancient by war standards, but it had never failed him. It wasn't built to impress. It was built to finish things. He tapped into the emergency relay inside the antenna's core, one of the last working EarthTech satellite connections still linked to the outer network. It didn't send much. Just a ping. A soft beacon. A whisper in the void. But it was enough. He encoded a short burst message with the details of the fight, stripped of emotion, boiled down to facts. Location. Outcome. Enemy dead. 1 human alive. Then he sent it. He didn't expect a reply. Not immediately. But somewhere, someone on the human side would read that message and realize the tide hadn't turned, not yet, but it had pushed back. They'd know that even in the coldest places, Earth still had teeth. He leaned back, watching frost creep along the inside of the tower wall, and finally let himself close his eyes for a moment. Just one moment. Then the ping returned. A second signal. Not from Earth. From a local relay, encrypted with a field code he hadn't seen in years. Old military. Very old. He stared at it, confused for a beat. Then it opened, and a line of text blinked onto the screen. Stay in the ice. More are coming. Kepler blinked, sat up straighter, reading it twice to make sure. There was no name. No call sign. No location tag. But whoever sent it knew him. Knew he was still breathing. Knew more teams were inbound. And more importantly, knew he wouldn't run. He stared at the line for a long time. Then he leaned forward, powered down the terminal, and rechecked his gear. Ammo was low. Rations were worse. The wind outside had shifted again. But it didn't matter. He stood, stretched his limbs, and slung the rifle back into place. Hush lifted her head and trotted to his side, ready as always. They walked into the dark once more, a single trail behind them, already vanishing under new snow. Because he wasn't done. And they were sending more. The snow was falling again, but it wasn't the quiet, delicate kind anymore. It came down in thick, wind-shredded sheets, cutting across the ridge like blades, blinding anything stupid enough to stand still for too long. The storm screamed in every direction, yet Kepler moved through it like it was nothing more than background noise. His steps were precise, boots placed where the snow was least likely to give, his body low and tight to the terrain. Hush padded ahead, fur dusted white, her eyes sharp and ears tracking everything behind the wind. She didn't whine. She never did. That was why she was still alive out here. Same as him. The message had changed everything. He didn't know who sent it, or how they had his field frequency. But it was the last part that mattered. More are coming. That meant the Warlords weren't backing off. The humiliation had cut deeper than he thought. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was erasure. They didn't want to kill him because he posed a tactical threat. They wanted to kill him because he made them look like fools. And now, with one transmission, they had admitted it. They were going to keep coming until either he vanished, or they did. Kepler had two options. Run to a safe zone, call for evac, leave this snow-choked nightmare behind and live out the rest of his life in the warmth of a planet that didn't try to kill him every morning. Or stay. Dig deeper. Set traps. Let the next wave come. There wasn't much to debate. He'd known his answer the second that message blinked across the screen. Running was for men with futures. He didn't see one beyond the next bullet. So if they were going to make him into a legend, he was going to make sure they earned every part of it. He reached the outer perimeter of the ridge he had mentally marked as Hell's front porch. A long field of open ice leading to a bottleneck canyon. Perfect kill zone. High cliffs on either side. No cover. Just wind and snow and the slow, creeping dread that came with being watched. He'd spent the last 2 days laying in surprises. Charges buried under Hitler rigs, snare wires stretched between pressure plates, even an old kinetic dart trap he salvaged from a dead mercenary's bunker. It wasn't elegant, but it didn't need to be. War wasn't art. It was plumbing. Pressure, angles, and leaks. The next team wouldn't be like the last. He knew that. The Warlords wouldn't send more elites just to fail again. They'd send something worse. Hybrids. Merc killers. Brutes wrapped in armor stitched with pain enhancer mesh. He'd seen them used before in outer zone purges. They didn't talk. They didn't plan. They just walked straight through gunfire like it was smoke. And if they were coming, Kepler needed more than clever. He needed cruel. He crouched low behind a snow-dusted outcrop and waited. The wind was loud enough to drown out most sounds, but there was something beneath it now. A thump. Heavy. Rhythmic. Like boots, but not quite. Then another. A pause. Another. He narrowed his eyes. Not standard drop gear. Not walkers either. Too irregular. He felt the sound before he saw them, shadows cutting through the wall of white. Broad-shouldered, hunched, their eyes glowing a faint, violent orange through the haze. 5 of them. No formation. Just a slow, relentless march forward. He didn't wait for them to stop. He triggered the first plate. A pop of pressure. A shriek of metal. One of the shadows dropped, a cable wrapped tight around its ankle, yanked into the air and slammed against the cliff face with such force the sound echoed despite the storm. The others didn't flinch. They didn't look at the body. They didn't alter course. Just kept walking. Kepler exhaled slowly and moved to the next trigger point. A second charge, this one rigged beneath a false snow ridge. As the next brute crossed it, the ice collapsed and the charge blew. The explosion wasn't massive, but the shape disappeared in fire and mist. 2 down. 3 kept walking. Still no words. No hesitation. They weren't soldiers. They were machines made of flesh. He fired his first shot from a perch above the canyon lip. It struck one in the chest, but it didn't fall. It staggered, hissed, then turned toward the cliff like it could see him through stone. The return fire was instant. A bolt of red plasma scorched across the ridge, missing him by inches. He moved fast, boots slipping, scrambling sideways to a fallback position marked by a black shard driven into the ice. As he slid behind cover, Hush darted after him, ears down, tail tucked tight. They both knew the rhythm of this game now. Stay ahead. Stay hidden. Bleed them. He counted seconds. 5. 10. Another brute hit a trip wire, and the dart trap fired. Not a kill, but the dart slammed through its left knee, sending it crashing sideways with a sound like bones being crushed under metal. It howled, a guttural, low-frequency roar that felt more animal than sentient. The remaining 2 were faster than the others. They started to flank. One moved high, scaling the cliff edge like a spider, claws digging into stone. Kepler gritted his teeth and fired again. This shot struck true, right through the side of the thing's neck. It didn't drop instantly. It gurgled, stumbled, then fell backward into the snow and didn't rise. He slid to his last fallback position, breath ragged. His shoulder was numb. Not from cold. He'd taken some shrapnel from the second charge. Nothing critical, but enough to slow him. He could feel the wet edge of blood inside his jacket. Hush pressed against him, growling low. The last brute was closing in. It walked through the wreckage of its fallen teammates, steam rising off its armor. Its face was mostly hidden, but the visible parts looked more like a scarred skull than a soldier's helmet. Its right hand was a fused weapon, a plasma axe glowing faint blue. This one wasn't just another killer. It was personal. It reached the base of the ridge, looked up, and roared. Kepler didn't flinch. He didn't run. He stood, stepped into view, and raised his rifle. They stared at each other for a second. Just one. The brute charged. Kepler fired once. Missed. Fired again. The shot clipped the shoulder. Third shot hit the thigh. It didn't stop. He dropped to one knee, waited, and when it was 5 feet away, he fired the last round straight up under the jaw. The bullet punched through with a wet snap, out the top of its head, and into the sky. The brute's momentum carried it forward another 2 steps. Then it dropped. Kepler didn't celebrate. He didn't breathe for a full minute. Then he stood, slowly, and looked over the field of broken bodies. Hush pressed against his legs, shaking. Above, the clouds began to shift again. Another ship. Another drop. He reloaded. Then he smiled. Let them come.